G'day guys and welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about space. How much space do you actually need to build a golf simulator? Now, I'm currently in my garage. I converted my garage into this golf simulator. But if you've got space in your house, if you've got a spare living room, if you've got a spare bedroom, if you've got a basement, you can build a golf sim anywhere. However, there are a few things you need to be aware of. If you're going to build a golf sim in your actual house, noise is going to be the biggest limiting factor. You've really got to be careful not to annoy people because hitting driver does get very loud when you're doing it indoors in a confined space. But in today's video, we're going to be talking about how much space you actually need to build a golf sim. I'm going to go into this in depth, so stay with me through this video. First, I'll be talking about the actual depth. So when I'm talking about depth, I mean space from the actual screen or the wall in front to the wall behind. How much depth do you need for a golf sim? I'll then be talking about height because height is a big factor that a lot of people don't consider. And when they build their golf sim, they end up not being able to hit driver. And then finally, I'm going to be touching on probably the hardest thing to actually get your head around is the actual width of a room. Width is very important, and there's a lot of things that you can mess up with when you start thinking about the actual width of the room that you need. So in today's video, I'm going to be talking about all those things, and I'm going to be looking at this through the lens of someone that wants to build a golf simulator where they can hit every club in the bag, including driver. Because as soon as you build a sim, if you don't have enough space to hit driver, you're going to end up, you'll love it at the start, but you're going to end up wanting to hit driver. And so today I'm going to be talking about all of the requirements you need to do to be able to hit every club in your bag. So I'm going to be using Bayside Golf, the channel partner's website today, because they make it very simple. They put the dimensions out there on their website, whether you want to build a single-handed sim or you want to build a left and right-handed sim, because width is obviously going to become a very big factor if you want to have both a left and right-handed bay. So heading over to the website, if we click on build your own simulator, it'll come up with the first question with do you have the space? Now Bayside recommends for a single-handed simulator, you need 3.6 meters in width, 2.65 meters in height, and 5 meters in depth. These are all minimum recommendations. If you want a left and right-handed bay, the width now goes to 4.5 meters wide. The other two dimensions stay the same. Now, can you build a simulator room with smaller dimensions? Yes, you can. However, you're going to be making quite a few sacrifices, and ultimately, you're not going to have the best experience because one, you're not going to be able to hit driver or potentially your woods, maybe even your long irons. You might be confined to say 6-iron and below. Yes, you can practice your wedges and your short irons. You're going to end up wanting more. And on top of that, when you start swinging in such a confined space, indoor swing syndrome is a real thing. And it's a real thing. Even in my environment, when I first started playing golf in this environment, I had indoor swing syndrome. What that is hitting in a confined space, your swing really slows down. You become really aware of your surroundings. You don't want to break your clubs. So your swing does actually become different and you become scared to actually swing at the speed that you would outside. A lot of people that get these sims, they build these sims in their home, they end up getting a launch monitor and then saying that the launch monitor is not accurate because they're not seeing the distances they see outside. But what is really happening is they have indoor swing syndrome and they're not actually swinging the golf club like they do outside. So with those dimensions on the Bayside website, they're going to be the minimum dimensions that you really want to use if you're going to build a golf sim. So let's break down these dimensions now, starting with depth. So 5 meters, a lot of people go 5 meters. That is a really long distance from, front to back of the room. That is just over 16 feet from front to back of the room. Sounds like a lot. But when you start breaking it down, that room does start to get eaten up. So for example, my enclosure here, I have the medium wide enclosure from Bayside. You can see these side barriers on my enclosure. Those actually stick out 1.5 meters. So both sides and the top stick out 1.5 meters. You also have to have 30 centimeters behind the screen as well. So you're giving up a foot of room behind the screen. If you're then going to swing driver in your environment, I'll get set up. When you make your backswing, If you have a really wide backswing, you've got to make sure that you have enough room behind you to actually swing that driver and not hit the wall. And then the same on the follow through. You don't want to follow through and then connect with your actual enclosure as well. So as soon as you start reducing that depth from 5 meters and shrinking it down, you just bring the back wall into play and also the enclosure into play on your follow through. So really 5 meters is going to be a minimum recommended. Ideally, you'd want 5.5 to 6 meters. So with that distance, 16 feet, take away a foot because you do need about a foot behind the actual impact screen because the ball's going to hit the impact screen. It's going to give a little bit. You don't want the ball to be hitting that back wall. So you've got 15 feet now. When you start thinking about launch monitors, that pretty much eliminates every radar-based unit. So we're talking about the MLM2 Pro, the Garmin R10, TrackMans, Mevo Plus, Mevo Gen 2. All of these radar-based units, they actually need more distance than that to give you the correct and accurate data. So the depth plays into which launch monitor you can potentially use in your environment. Let's now talk about height. So with height, if you've got 2.65 meters or 8 foot 8 inches, you will be able to get away with most enclosures. Now, this enclosure that I'm using from Bayside is 2.6 meters in height. And so in my environment, I've got 2.7 meter ceilings. I can use that. But that's not the only thing you need to think about with height. With the longer clubs, especially with driver, if you are tall or you have a really upright swing, then you're gonna need higher ceilings. Now, for example, I'm 6 foot. I've got 2.7 meter ceilings. However, my hitting mat is 4 centimeters in height. So that takes me down to 2.66 meters. I can still hit driver in my environment, but only just. I do have a driver that has quite a few battle scars on it from actually hitting the roof. And as soon as you start connecting with the roof, that's where that indoor swing syndrome really starts to kick in. Now, what did I do to overcome this? I ended up just cutting 2 sections and raising 2 sections out of my ceiling. I had 2 very distinct spots where my club would hit in my backswing and my club would hit in my follow through. And so I simply just raised those sections slightly. If you are really tall or you have a really upright swing, then ideally you want about 3 meter ceilings or 10 feet so you can comfortably swing driver. Let's finally talk about width. This is the tough one. And the reason I say it's tough is because this is the one that a lot of people get wrong. There is a reason why Bayside recommend 3.6 meters as a minimum, and I'm going to talk about why now. So the biggest mistake people make when they're considering width in their golf sim is they'll come into their environment, they'll stand right in the middle of their room, and they'll do a few air swings with driver, and they'll go, I've got plenty of room, enough to build a golf sim. And the reason that's a mistake is because when you're hitting a golf ball, you want to actually hit into the middle of your screen or as close to the middle as you can get. So what they should be doing is if you mark out the middle of your room and then place a golf ball in the middle of your room and then set up to a driver, and what you'll realize now is when I'm set up to this, I'm significantly further to the left of the center of my room. And what that means is if you've only got a 3.5 meter wide room, there is a potential you're going to hit the back wall with your driver. So you do actually have a couple of options if this is you. The first one is you can actually move your whole enclosure, if you have enough room, to the right and then move your hitting position slightly to the right as well. If you don't have the room to do that though, if your room is 3.6 meters in width and your enclosure is 3.5 meters in width, there is one more option. You can offset. However, you don't want to offset that much. The maximum offset you want to do is about a foot or 30 centimeters. So that instead of me setting up in the middle now, I'm going to be setting up about there. So you've bought yourself an extra foot of room and now you've got plenty of room behind you. In my environment, from my hitting position, if I measure from my back heels to my wall, I have 1 meter. So why can't you offset more than 30 centimeters? The reason for that is if I offset 30 centimeters, I still have ample room in my backswing where I'm not going to hit my projector. If I start moving more than 30 centimeters across, I've now just brought my projector into play, especially if I've got some sort of backswing that looks like Matthew Wolf. You're really bringing that projector into play. Okay, so that's how much room you need to build a golf simulator. I hope you guys found that useful. If you did, let me know. If you got any comments or questions, leave them down below, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Cheers.